K9 returns to police station every day, years after his police owner disappeared. The security camera caught it like clockwork. 7 a.m. sharp, a Belgian Malinois with tactical gear striding through the Atlanta Police Department's main entrance. His badge still gleamed against the black harness, though the K9 unit patches had begun to fade. The front desk sergeant didn't even look up anymore. Max's daily pilgrimage had become as routine as the morning shift change. The shepherd moved with military precision through the bustling precinct, his path unwavering, past the break room where detectives nursed their coffee, through the maze of desks in the bullpen until he reached his destination, an empty desk in the K9 unit's corner. The nameplate had been removed months ago, but the chair still held a worn tactical vest with Collins emblazoned across the back. 2 years. 730 days of the same routine ever since Detective Sarah Collins vanished during what should have been a routine night patrol. The brass had written it off as another tragic loss in the line of duty, but Max knew different. They all did. You don't just lose the department's most decorated K9 handler without a trace. Morning, old friend. Detective Marcus Jenkins set his coffee on the desk next to Sarah's, his eyes catching the photo still pinned to her bulletin board, Sarah and Max at graduation, her green eyes bright with pride as she knelt beside her newly certified partner. Still keeping watch, huh? Max's ears twitched at Jenkins' voice, but his gaze remained fixed on the precinct's entrance. Every morning, same position, same vigilant stance. Some of the younger officers called it blind loyalty, a dog unable to move on. Jenkins knew better. In 6 years of working alongside Sarah and Max, he'd learned that nothing the shepherd did was without purpose. The morning might have continued like any other if Captain Reynolds hadn't chosen that moment to emerge from his office, carrying a dusty evidence box marked Collins, Esther Case, Renault 2023-847. The captain's footsteps faltered when he saw Max, guilt flickering across his weathered features. For the first time in 2 years, Max broke his vigil. A low growl rumbled in his chest, his muscled frame tensing as he tracked the box's movement. Jenkins froze, coffee halfway to his lips. He'd seen that look before, back when Max used to zero in on hidden explosives or concealed suspects. "Easy, boy," Reynolds muttered, clutching the box closer. "Just doing some spring cleaning." "Case is going to cold storage." Max's growl deepened. Around the bullpen, conversations died as officers turned to watch. The shepherd rose slowly, his tactical harness catching the fluorescent lights as he stepped toward Reynolds. "Max, stay!" Jenkins commanded, but there was no authority in his voice. Something was happening here, something that made the hair on his neck stand up, just like Max's was doing now. The shepherd ignored him, padding forward with deliberate steps until he reached Reynolds. Then, with precision that reminded everyone why he'd been the unit's top dog, Max pressed his nose against a specific spot on the box's side. Reynolds jerked back, but not before Jenkins caught it, a flash of pure panic across the captain's face. "I said cold storage," Reynolds snapped, backing toward the file room. "And Jenkins, keep that dog under control, or he'll be removed from the premises permanently." Max watched Reynolds retreat, his posture shifting from aggressive to alert. Then, for the first time since Sarah disappeared, he turned to Jenkins and barked. Sharp, urgent, purposeful. Jenkins felt his skin prickle. In 6 years working K9, he'd learned that dogs like Max didn't just bark for attention. Sarah had trained him too well for that. Every action, every signal was deliberate. "What did you see, boy?" Jenkins muttered, crossing to Sarah's desk. Max followed, nose twitching as Jenkins began rifling through her old files. What was in that box that spooked Reynolds so bad? The shepherd's tail gave a single wag, a gesture so familiar it made Jenkins' chest ache. It was the same signal Max used to give Sarah when he'd found something crucial during an investigation. Around them, the precinct returned to its morning routine. Officers filed reports, phones rang, coffee makers gurgled. But something had shifted, like the first tremor before an earthquake. Max resumed his post by Sarah's desk, but his eyes never left the file room door. Jenkins settled into his chair, the coffee cooling forgotten on his desk. He pulled up the digital case file for Sarah's disappearance, scanning it with new eyes. 2 years of dead ends and false leads had left him frustrated, hopeless. But Max's reaction to that box had sparked something he hadn't felt since the night Sarah vanished: hope. In the security office, the morning footage played on a loop, a Belgian Malinois entering at 7 a.m. sharp, moving through the precinct with purpose. But now, freeze-framing the moment Max confronted Reynolds, the security officer leaned closer to his screen. There was something else there, something in the way the shepherd's nose touched the box. Almost like he was pointing to something specific. The officer reached for his phone, then stopped. Captain Reynolds' words from 2 years ago echoed in his memory. The Collins case is closed. Anyone caught investigating unauthorized leads will face immediate suspension. He deleted the footage. Outside the precinct, Atlanta's morning traffic roared past, oblivious to the drama unfolding within. But in the K9 unit's corner, a shepherd and a detective had just reignited a 2-year-old mystery. And somewhere in the city, buried under layers of corruption and conspiracy, the truth about Sarah Collins' disappearance waited to be uncovered. Max settled into his familiar position, eyes fixed on the precinct entrance. But now there was a new tension in his frame, a readiness that hadn't been there before. The waiting game was over. The hunt had begun. The evidence box sat unopened on Jenkins' kitchen table, stolen from the records room during the graveyard shift. Max circled it restlessly, his nails clicking against the linoleum floor. Outside, Atlanta's skyline glittered against the 3 a.m. darkness, but Jenkins barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the case number scrawled across the box's lid: Max 2023-847. "What did you sense in there, boy?" Jenkins muttered, running his fingers along the box's edges. What made Reynolds so nervous? Max stopped pacing and pressed his nose against the same spot he'd indicated in the precinct. Under the harsh kitchen lights, Jenkins noticed something he'd missed before: a slight discoloration in the cardboard, barely visible unless you knew where to look. The shepherd's tail gave that single, purposeful wag. Jenkins grabbed his knife, carefully cutting along the box's seam. Inside, case files and evidence bags lay exactly as logged in the official manifest, but when he lifted the stack, his breath caught. There, concealed beneath a false bottom, lay a single USB drive. Max's ears pricked forward. "Damn, Sarah," Jenkins whispered, turning the drive over in his hand. "What did you find?" His laptop whirred to life, the screen's glow casting shadows across the kitchen. The drive's contents appeared, hundreds of files, all encrypted. At the root level, a single video file waited, dated the day before Sarah disappeared. Sarah's face filled the screen, her usual confidence replaced by something Jenkins had never seen before: fear. "Marcus, if you're watching this, then things went sideways." She glanced over her shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "The corruption goes deeper than we thought. All the way to—" Static cut through the audio. When it cleared, Sarah was speaking faster. "Max knows what to do. I've trained him for this. Watch his routine. Everything he does has meaning. The times, the paths, the places he stops. It's all—" The video cut off. Jenkins sat back, his mind racing. For 2 years, they'd all watched Max's daily pilgrimage to the precinct, assuming it was just a grieving dog's routine. But Sarah's words changed everything. This wasn't grief. It was a message. A sharp bark snapped Jenkins from his thoughts. Max stood by the door, his posture rigid with urgency. The clock read 3:47 a.m. "You want to show me something?" Jenkins grabbed his jacket. "Right now." Max's only response was to paw at the door handle. The streets were empty as Jenkins' unmarked car wound through downtown Atlanta. In the passenger seat, Max sat alert, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. At each intersection, a subtle head tilt or soft whine guided their path. They ended up at Piedmont Park, the sprawling green space, eerily silent in the pre-dawn hours. Max led them to a maintenance shed near the botanical garden, then sat, waiting. "This spot means something, boy." The shepherd's ears twitched at approaching footsteps. Jenkins melted into the shadows, one hand on his weapon. Around the corner came Officer Chen from Technical Services, looking nervously over his shoulder as he made his way to the shed. Max remained perfectly still as Chen pulled out a key and slipped inside. 5 minutes later, the officer emerged carrying a hard drive, his movements furtive in the darkness. Jenkins' phone vibrated. A text from his CI and technical found something. Every Thursday, 3:55 a.m., someone accesses sealed case files from an unauthorized terminal. Been happening for 2 years. The pieces started clicking. Thursday, 3:55 a.m. Jenkins checked his watch. 3:53 a.m. Chen was halfway to his car when Max finally moved. The shepherd's powerful frame launched forward, a black shadow against the park's darkness. Before Chen could react, Max had him pinned, the hard drive clattering to the ground. "Police! Don't move!" Jenkins emerged, weapon drawn. "Hands where I can see them." "Jenkins?" Chen's face went pale. "Look, this isn't what it seems. Save it." Jenkins secured the cuffs while Max kept watch. "Why don't you tell me why you're accessing sealed files in the middle of the night? Starting with Sarah Collins' case." "You don't understand." Sweat beaded on Chen's forehead despite the cool air. "They'll kill me if I talk, just like they did to—" He caught himself. Jenkins leaned closer. "Like they did to who?" But Chen's eyes had gone wide, fixed on something behind them. Max's growl came too late. The taser hit Jenkins in the back, electricity arcing through his body. As he fell, he caught a glimpse of a figure in tactical gear emerging from the shadows. Max lunged, but a second taser found its mark. The shepherd went down hard. Through the haze of pain, Jenkins watched helplessly as Chen was dragged away. The hard drive disappeared into the mysterious figure's pocket. Within seconds, the park was silent again. Jenkins crawled to Max, checking the shepherd's vitals. Strong heartbeat, already starting to stir. Thank God for that tactical harness. It had absorbed most of the shock. "Good boy," Jenkins muttered, helping Max to his feet. "You tried to warn me." The shepherd shook himself, then immediately went to where Chen had dropped something in the struggle, a key card, partially hidden in the grass. The logo was barely visible in the dim light. Atlanta Police Department, Internal Affairs. Max's tail gave that deliberate single wag. Dawn was breaking as they made their way back to the car. Jenkins' back screamed with every step, but his mind was racing. Sarah's last case, weekly file access, internal affairs. The puzzle pieces were there, but the picture they formed was uglier than he'd imagined. In the east, the sun began to paint Atlanta's skyline in shades of gold and pink. Soon, the city would wake. Officers would file into the precinct, detectives would work their cases, and Max would take his usual post by Sarah's desk. But now, Jenkins understood. Every minute of that routine was a message. Every path was a clue. Sarah hadn't disappeared. She'd left them a map, and Max was the key to following it. The shepherd's eyes met Jenkins in the rearview mirror, alert and knowing. For 2 years, he'd been patiently waiting for someone to decode his handler's final instructions. Now, finally, the real investigation could begin. Behind them, sirens wailed in the distance. Atlanta was waking up, unaware that in the pre-dawn hours, a 2-year-old conspiracy had begun to unravel, all thanks to a dog who never gave up his post and a detective who finally learned to listen. The Atlanta Police Department's K-9 training facility looked different at midnight. Jenkins sat in his car, watching Max explore the familiar obstacles and training equipment, now silent shadows against the Georgia moonlight. 3 years ago, this was where it all began, where Sarah Collins first met the Belgian Malinois, who would become both her partner and her lifeline. The security footage from Sarah's final days played on Jenkins' laptop, smuggled out by his CI before Chen's arrest, sent technical services into lockdown. On screen, Sarah moved through the precinct with Max at her side, her movements casual to anyone who didn't know better. But Jenkins now saw what he'd missed before, The subtle hand signals, the way Max responded to movements so slight they seemed accidental. "She was teaching you a code," Jenkins murmured, watching Max investigate a particular corner of the training yard. "Right under everyone's nose." The shepherd's head snapped up, ears forward. Without warning, he bolted toward the facility's back building, the one Sarah had used for specialized training. Jenkins followed, gun drawn. But instead of danger, he found Max pawing at a specific spot on the wall. The hidden compartment blended perfectly with the concrete, but under Jenkins' flashlight, he caught the seam. Inside lay a weathered notebook, its pages filled with Sarah's precise handwriting. "Training log, Special Operations Protocol," Jenkins read aloud. "Day 1, teaching Max independent investigation markers. If anything happens to me, he'll know how to guide a friendly asset to the evidence." Max sat beside him, watching intently as Jenkins flipped through the pages. Sarah had documented everything. Training schedules, code words, specific behaviors she'd taught Max to recognize and respond to. The final entry was dated 3 days before she vanished. "Final test successful. Max can now operate independently for extended periods, maintaining routine while marking critical locations. Handler signals established for evidence locations, surveillance points, dead drops, and emergency protocols. God help me if I'm actually going to need this, but my gut says the storm is coming." A noise outside made them both freeze. Max's ears swiveled, tracking something Jenkins couldn't hear. Then a familiar voice. "I wondered who'd finally figure it out." Catherine Martinez stepped into the beam of Jenkins' flashlight, her internal affairs badge catching the light. 3 years ago, she'd been Sarah's supervisor in major crimes before her sudden transfer to IA. "Did Sarah tell you what she found?" Jenkins kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered. "Before they got to her." "Not everything." Martinez moved closer, hands carefully visible. "But I know why she spent 6 months teaching Max those special protocols. The same reason I got buried in internal affairs when I started asking questions about certain evidence discrepancies." Max watched Martinez intently, but didn't growl. A good sign. Sarah's notes mentioned something about teaching Max to recognize friendly assets. 3 years ago, Martinez continued, Sarah and Max intercepted a drug shipment at the port. Standard bust except for one detail. Sarah recognized one of the escorts, former Atlanta PD, supposedly died in the line of duty 2 years earlier. Jenkins remembered the case. "The officer who allegedly drowned during a pursuit?" "Exactly." Sarah started digging, found more dead officers, all working security for private organizations tied to police contracts. Follow the money, and it led straight to internal affairs. Jenkins felt the pieces clicking. They weren't investigating corruption. They were managing it. Martinez's smile was bitter. Fake deaths, evidence tampering, redirected investigations, a whole system designed to protect certain interests. Sarah got too close, so they tried to eliminate her. But she was smarter than they expected. Max suddenly tensed, a low growl building in his chest. Martinez immediately moved to the shadows, drawing her weapon. Headlights swept across the training yard's entrance. "That's my cue." Martinez pressed a key into Jenkins' hand. "Storage Unit 247 at Piedmont Lock and Safe. Sarah left something there for Max. Said only he would know how to access it. And Jenkins? Watch your back. They've already removed 3 others who got this close." She melted into the darkness as 2 patrol cars pulled into the lot. Max's posture shifted from alert to casual, resuming his exploration of the training equipment as if nothing had happened. Jenkins tucked Sarah's notebook into his jacket, marveling at how much planning she'd put into this, every detail anticipated, every contingency prepared for. She'd known they were coming for her and had transformed her own dog into a living safety deposit box, one that could think, adapt, and choose when to reveal its secrets. The patrol officers barely glanced at them. Everyone knew about Detective Jenkins' late-night training sessions with Sarah Collins' dog. His reputation as a grieving friend provided the perfect cover for what was really happening. As they drove home, Jenkins studied Max in the rearview mirror. The shepherd sat alert, watching the city scroll past. How many other secrets was he carrying? How many more breadcrumbs had Sarah left for them to follow? The storage unit key felt heavy in Jenkins' pocket. Whatever Sarah had left there, it was important enough to create an elaborate system of clues leading to it. Important enough to teach Max an entire covert language. Important enough to die for. Dawn was still hours away. At 7 a.m., Max would make his daily journey to the precinct, take his post by Sarah's desk, and maintain the routine that everyone dismissed as a grieving dog's ritual. But now Jenkins understood. Every minute was a message, every path a clue, every seemingly random action part of Sarah Collins's final master plan. Max's reflection caught his eye again. In the dark car, the shepherd's gaze was steady, patient. For 2 years, he'd been faithfully executing his handler's last orders, waiting for someone to understand the performance hidden within the routine. The real question was, what would they find in Storage Unit 247? And more importantly, who else was looking for it? Piedmont Lock and Safe loomed against the pre-dawn sky, its rows of storage units casting long shadows in the security lights. Jenkins killed the engine 2 blocks away, checking his mirrors for the 3rd time. No tail, at least none he could spot. Ready, boy? Max's only response was to fix his eyes on Unit 247, barely visible from their position. They'd waited until 4 a.m., the exact time Sarah's notes specified for maximum security protocol. Jenkins had assumed it referred to guard rotations, but as they approached the facility, he understood. At this hour, the security cameras cycled through their daily reboot sequence. 2 minutes of digital blindness. 120 seconds to get in and out. The lock clicked open under Martinez's key, but Max suddenly grabbed Jenkins' sleeve, pulling him back. The shepherd's nose twitched, and Jenkins caught it too, a faint chemical smell. "Tripwire," Jenkins whispered. Max's tail gave that single confirmatory wag. Jenkins pulled out Sarah's notebook, flipping to the section on unit protocols. There, in her precise handwriting, storage entry sequence, Max lead, standard EOD pattern, explosive ordnance disposal. Of course, Sarah had cross-trained Max in bomb detection. "Show me, boy." The shepherd moved with practiced precision, weaving a specific pattern into the unit. His body language changed at certain points. Spots to avoid. Jenkins followed exactly in Max's footsteps until they reached a metal cabinet at the back. 1 minute left in the camera blackout. The cabinet's combination lock had no numbers, just pressure points that Max indicated with his nose in a specific sequence. Inside, Jenkins found a laptop, its casing modified with some kind of military-grade encryption device. 30 seconds. They retraced their steps out of the unit, Jenkins clutching the laptop. As they cleared the door, the security lights hummed back to life. Perfect timing. They were halfway to the car when Max froze, hackles rising. Jenkins dropped to a crouch behind a dumpster just as a black SUV rounded the corner, its headlights off. "Atlanta PD! Stop right there!" The voice belonged to Captain Reynolds. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as multiple figures emerged from the SUV, all in tactical gear. "It's over, Jenkins," Reynolds called out. "Give us the laptop and we can pretend this night never happened." Max pressed against Jenkins' leg, directing his attention to a narrow gap between the storage units. An escape route. "Last chance," Reynolds warned. "Don't throw away your career for a dead woman's conspiracy theories." Jenkins remembered Sarah's final video message, the fear in her eyes. "She's not dead, is she, Captain? That's why you're here. She hid something on this laptop that proves it." The captain's laugh was cold. "Doesn't matter now, we've got the place surrounded. You've got nowhere to go." Max suddenly barked. Sharp, urgent, the same way he had when warning about the tripwire. Jenkins instinctively rolled left as gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off the dumpster. "Take them down!" Reynolds shouted. "Recover that laptop at all costs!" Jenkins scrambled after Max through the gap between units, keeping low. The shepherd led him through a maze of corridors and alleys, always one step ahead of their pursuers. They emerged onto a busy street just as an Atlanta transit bus approached. Max bounded toward it, and Jenkins understood. The same bus Sarah used to mark drop-off points in her training exercises. They barely made it through the doors before the bus pulled away, leaving Reynolds and his team cursing in the street behind them. Jenkins' phone buzzed. Martinez. Don't answer any calls. They've flagged you as armed and dangerous, issued a bolo. Every cop in Atlanta will be looking for you. Max sat calmly beside him, as if being hunted by corrupt police officers was part of his daily routine. Maybe, Jenkins realized, it was. Sarah had trained him for exactly this scenario. The laptop hummed in Jenkins' backpack, its secret still locked away. But Reynolds' reaction told him all he needed to know. Whatever Sarah had discovered was big enough to turn the entire department against them. His phone buzzed again. An unknown number, but the message was clear. Storage unit was just the beginning. She left more. Let Max guide you. M. The bus rolled through downtown Atlanta, its regular route now a lifeline. Jenkins studied their fellow passengers, an elderly woman with groceries, two teenagers with headphones, a man in a business suit. Any of them could be reporting their location. Max's ears suddenly pricked forward. His routine time was approaching, 7 a.m. at the precinct. Even now, under fire and on the run, the shepherd was thinking about his mission. Jenkins checked his watch. 6:45 a.m. In 15 minutes, every officer would expect Max to make his daily appearance. His absence would signal that something was wrong. Unless... You still need to make your rounds, don't you, boy? Jenkins whispered. Keep up appearances while we figure this out. Max's tail gave that familiar single wag. Even in chaos, Sarah's training held true. Maintain routine, hide in plain sight, trust the plan. The bus approached their stop. Through the windows, Jenkins could see police cars circling the area, officers showing his photo to pedestrians. His phone buzzed one final time. Let him go in alone. They won't suspect the dog. M. Jenkins took a deep breath, unclipping Max's leash. Everything in him screamed against letting the shepherd walk into potential danger alone. But Sarah had planned for this, had trained Max for this very moment. See you on the other side, partner. Max slipped off the bus and into the morning crowd, just another K9 reporting for duty. Jenkins watched him disappear around the corner, heading for the precinct with his usual purposeful stride. The laptop weighed heavy in his backpack as the bus pulled away. Somewhere in this city, Sarah Collins was alive, counting on them to unravel her elaborate puzzle. And for the first time in 2 years, they were finally one step ahead. Now they just had to stay alive long enough to prove it. The encrypted laptop took Martinez 3 hours to crack. Jenkins watched the code scroll across the screen from their hiding place, a condemned warehouse near the port where Sarah had once conducted training exercises. Max paced the perimeter, his tactical harness now equipped with a cellular tracker Martinez had provided. "My God!" Martinez whispered, her fingers freezing over the keyboard. Sarah found them all, every single one. The files populated the screen. Detailed records of 38 officers, all officially declared dead in the line of duty. All secretly relocated with new identities, all working private security for a shell corporation tied to Judge Michael Harrison, the man who'd signed off on every major police contract for the past decade. They weren't just hiding corruption, Jenkins realized, scanning the documents. They were building a private army, using taxpayer money to fund it. Martinez pulled up financial records. Each dead officer's pension going straight into offshore accounts, equipment disappearing from evidence, tactical gear written off as destroyed during operations. Max's sudden growl cut through the conversation. Outside, tires crunched on gravel. Martinez quickly transferred the files to an encrypted cloud server. They tracked the laptop's IP. We need to... The windows exploded inward as flashbangs detonated around them. Through the smoke, tactical teams breached from multiple entry points. Max launched into action, taking down the first officer through the door, while Jenkins and Martinez scrambled for cover. "Atlanta PD, weapons down!" Captain Reynolds' voice boomed through a megaphone. "You're surrounded." "Funny," a new voice cut through the chaos. "I was about to say the same thing." The smoke cleared to reveal Catherine Chen, the supposedly arrested technical officer, standing at the warehouse's main entrance. Behind her, a dozen officers with FBI tactical gear trained their weapons on Reynolds's team. Special Agent Chen, FBI Underground Operations. She held up her badge. Captain Reynolds, you and your men are under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and the attempted murder of Detective Sarah Collins. Max's ears pricked forward at Sarah's name. Before Reynolds could respond, the shepherd suddenly broke formation, bolting toward a stack of shipping containers. "Max, wait!" Jenkins called, but the dog was moving with purpose, following a scent that only he recognized. Reynolds saw his chance in the confusion. He turned to run, only to find Martinez blocking his path, weapon raised. "The only place you're running is to a federal prison," she said. But Jenkins barely heard the exchange. He was focused on Max, who had stopped at a container marked with a faded customs stamp, the same stamp that had been on Sarah's last case file. The shepherd pawed at the container's door, whining urgently. "Get that container open," Chen ordered. "Now!" SWAT officers rushed forward with cutting tools. As the door creaked open, Max dove inside, disappearing into the darkness. Then came a sound that stopped Jenkins' heart. A human voice, weak but alive, calling out, "Good boy, Max. Good boy." Sarah Collins sat propped against the container wall, thin and pale but breathing. Her tactical uniform was filthy, her hair matted, but her eyes were alert and fixed on her partner as Max covered her face with frantic kisses. 2 years, she croaked as medical teams rushed in. 2 years in this damn container, moved between locations whenever they thought someone was getting close. But I knew Max would never stop looking. Jenkins knelt beside her, tears burning his eyes. The training protocols, the daily routines. "You planned all of it?" Sarah managed a weak smile, her hand buried in Max's fur. "Had to leave a trail only he could follow. Dogs can detect scents through steel, did you know that? Even track them across water. I made sure they kept moving me through his patrol routes, kept me close enough for him to catch my scent, even if he couldn't reach me." "The laptop?" Martinez asked, joining them. "Insurance." Sarah's voice strengthened as the medics started an IV. Every file, every name, every transaction, knew they wouldn't kill me until they found it, gave Max time to work. Outside, the FBI was leading Reynolds and his team away in handcuffs. Chen approached, holding up her phone. "Judge Harrison just tried to board a private jet at Hartsfield-Jackson. Our teams are intercepting him now. It's over, Sarah." But Sarah's attention was still on Max, who hadn't left her side. "You did it, boy. Just like we trained. Just like I knew you would." The shepherd's tail gave that single, purposeful wag, no longer a secret signal, but a simple confirmation between partners. Martinez squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "The FBI's been building this case for 3 years. Chen was inserted into technical services to track the money, but we could never prove the officers were alive. Not until you found them. And nearly died for it," Jenkins added. Sarah scratched behind Max's ears, her movements weak but determined. "Worth it. They thought they could hide their operation in plain sight, didn't count on a K9 officer being smart enough to document everything, and they definitely didn't count on Max." The shepherd sat proudly beside his handler's stretcher as the medics prepared to move her. His mission was complete, but his posture made it clear. He wasn't leaving her side again. Through the container's open door, dawn painted the Atlanta skyline in shades of promise. Sarah would need months of rehabilitation, and the federal investigation was just beginning. But as Jenkins watched Max guide the stretcher toward the waiting ambulance, he understood what Sarah had known all along. Sometimes the strongest bonds aren't the ones written in police manuals or legal contracts. Sometimes they're written in the silent language of loyalty, in the patient vigil of a partner who never lost faith, in the heart of a dog who turned his own grief into a 2-year covert operation. And sometimes justice wears a tactical harness and answers to the name Max. The Atlanta Police Department's annual K9 demonstration day dawned bright and clear, 6 months after Sarah Collins's rescue. Hundreds of spectators filled the bleachers around the training yard, but all eyes were on the Belgian Malinois running the obstacle course, his tactical harness gleaming new, his movements precise and powerful. Max cleared the final wall with characteristic grace, then turned to check on his partner. Sarah Collins walked the course's perimeter, her stride still showing traces of her captivity, but growing stronger each day. The physical therapy was working, and though she'd never fully regained the speed that once made her the department's top K9 handler, her mind remained sharp as ever. "Perfect execution, boy," she called, and Max's tail gave that familiar single wag, their private signal, now famous throughout the department as the gesture that helped bring down Atlanta's largest police corruption scandal. In the stands, Jenkins watched the demonstration with Martinez and Chen. The FBI investigation had concluded last week with Judge Harrison's sentencing 30 years without parole. Captain Reynolds and his conspirators had taken plea deals, their testimonies unraveling decades of corruption. "Hard to believe it's been 6 months, Martinez mused, watching Sarah and Max work the crowd. The brass wanted to retire them both after everything that happened, saying they'd earned their rest. Chen smiled. They didn't understand, did they? This was never just a job for them. She was right. Sarah and Max had refused retirement, instead taking on a new role, training other K9 units in advanced detection and covert operations. Their story had become required reading at the FBI Academy, a case study in persistence, partnership, and thinking beyond conventional tactics. The demonstration concluded to thunderous applause. As the crowd dispersed, Jenkins noticed a familiar face in the parking lot, Michael Torres, one of the dead officers from Harrison's private army. He'd turned state's evidence, helping the FBI dismantle similar operations in 3 other cities. "Officer Collins," Torres called out, approaching cautiously. Max positioned himself between them. "Old habits die hard. I owe you an apology, and a thank you." Sarah studied him, one hand resting on Max's head. "For what?" "For showing me what real police work looks like." Torres gestured to the training yard. 2 years in that container, and you never broke, never gave up the evidence, kept faith that your partner would find you. "Partners," Sarah corrected, scratching Max's ears. "The whole department played a part. Jenkins following the clues, Martinez protecting the investigation, Chen running the federal angle. But Max was the key," Torres said. "Harrison's people searched for months, trying to figure out how information was still leaking, even with you contained. They never suspected the dog was running counterintelligence." Sarah's smile held a hint of pride. "Most people underestimate them. See only what they're trained to do, never what they're capable of learning." As if to demonstrate, Max suddenly tensed, his attention fixing on a corner of the parking lot. Moments later, a security guard appeared, running toward them. "Detective Collins." The guard was breathless. "Got a situation at the evidence warehouse, something about suspicious packages near the ventilation system." Sarah exchanged glances with Jenkins. Some of Harrison's associates were still at large, and threats against key witnesses had increased lately. "Guess our retirement celebration will have to wait," she said, already moving toward her vehicle. Max fell into step beside her, his posture shifting from demonstration mode to full alert. "You sure you're up for this?" Jenkins called after her. Sarah paused, looking down at her partner. Max's eyes met hers with complete understanding, the same connection that had sustained them through 2 years of separation and decades of corruption. "What do you think, boy? One more case?" Max's tail gave that single, purposeful wag. Together, they headed toward their waiting patrol car, their shadows merging in the Georgia sun. Around them, the training facility hummed with activity. New K9 teams learning the basics, veteran handlers sharing techniques, the next generation of partnerships taking shape. But none quite like this one. Sarah and Max had rewritten the book on K9 operations, proving that the strongest partnerships transcend training manuals and service records. Their story would be told in police academies for years to come, not just as a lesson in investigative technique, but as a testament to the extraordinary bonds that can form between handler and dog. The patrol car pulled away, lights flashing. In the passenger seat, Max sat alert, ready for whatever challenges awaited. Beside him, Sarah Collins, no longer a prisoner, no longer a victim, but a legend in her own right, guided them toward their next mission. Behind them, the training yard stood empty, the obstacle course waiting for tomorrow's exercises, but the legacy they'd created would endure, in the new protocols being developed, in the enhanced training programs, and in the simple truth that sometimes the most powerful weapon in law enforcement isn't a gun or a badge. Sometimes it's a dog who refuses to give up on his partner. Sometimes it's a handler who trusts her partner enough to stake her life on his abilities. And sometimes justice arrives on four paws, wearing a tactical harness, guided by a bond that no prison cell could break and no corruption could corrupt. Max and Sarah Collins had already proven that once. They were ready to prove it again.